Recognize Dr. Miller-Meeks from Iowa for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you so much, Chair Winstrup, and thank you to all of our witnesses who are here today. I'm both a doctor and a former director of the Iowa Department of Public Health, as well as a military veteran of 24 years. And like Dr. Metzl said, I have waited 3 years for this hearing. And I have, in fact, put people over politics and science over conspiracy. Our first inquiry on the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis, this is my 3rd year on this committee, was June 29th, 2021, on origins of COVID-19, and the only people that attended were Republicans. We had a press conference at that hearing, and I was concerned that the public and the press weren't conveying that it wasn't partisan in trying to determine origins. It was, in fact, of utmost importance, and importance not just to Americans, but to the international community. At that press conference on June 29th, 2021, I said, the reason we need to know the origins of COVID-19 is to prevent and prepare for the next pandemic. We need to know, one, there are immediate disclosure rules. There was not immediate disclosure of a virus that would lead to a worldwide pandemic. Immediate disclosure, and WHO has a vested interest in this and making sure there's compliance. Laboratory safety. It was known, even in the US, there are labs who have lab leaks. Laboratory safety, biosafety lab 4 work being done in a biosafety lab 2. It was known that this was occurring at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, so lab safety. And thirdly, and I think that Dr. Redfield has mentioned this, all of you have mentioned this, and that is the ethics of gain-of-function research or types of research. Often we as scientists get ahead of the ethics, but the ethics of types of research, and again, the international community has a vested interest in discussing and debating these topics. And I've published in journals before, peer-reviewed journals. I know how the editing and the peer review process works. And I also know very intimately of the disclosure requirements and conflicts of interest, including financial. So over the weekend, we released new emails and documents that suggested that Dr. Fauci prompted the drafting of a publication, ultimately called Proximal Origins, that would disprove the lab leak theory. The authors of this paper skewed available evidence to achieve that goal. And Dr. Jeremy Farrar, now chief scientist for the World Health Organization, went uncredited despite significant involvement. So are you all aware of these documents? You can just nod affirmatively. All of the witnesses except one have nodded yes. You know, many of you have been in journalism and in science writing for a long time. And so, Dr. Metzl, can you explain the process briefly, because I have little time, of drafting, editing, and reviewing a publication in a science magazine?
Well, Mr. Wade is probably better at this than me because he was an editor of 2 science magazines, but what I will say is different people contribute, and it's normal practice to list the names of the people who have participated.
And then, Mr. Wade, given that acknowledgement, do you think it's important that there's proper crediting and acknowledging of authors?
I think the question of who is or is not an author of a paper is somewhat loose. So many people interpret it different ways. There are things called honorary authorships where you talk to someone in an elevator and say, oh, I'll add you to my paper. It's not there are no hard and fast rules for who should be author of a paper.
But if an individual is the genesis of that paper, do you think they should be acknowledged?
Well, if they make some important intellectual contribution to it, they should. I don't know that Farrar did or was in a position to. All we know is that he suggested a minor editing change to the paper.
Well, and Dr. Arwater, you mentioned that we know the intermediate host for SARS. How long did it take for us to find the intermediate host for SARS?
It did take a few years. It was not immediate.
And MERS?
MERS also took some time.
Okay. And are any of you aware of a furin cleavage site occurring naturally?
Yes.
Dr. Metzl, go ahead.
Yeah, they occur naturally, but not in SARS-like viruses other than SARS-CoV-2.
So in other viruses, but not in SARS, and SARS-CoV-2, very similar to
Correct.
SARS.
In no SARS-like viruses, and it showed up for the first time in a SARS-like virus in the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which seemed to appear out of nowhere.
The endonuclease fingerprint, how common does that occur? The repeating cycle, CG, GC, GG.
The furin
amino
cleavage
acids.
site. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
my point in that is that there is, as you said, Dr. Metzel, extraordinary circumstantial evidence that this came from a lab. I don't know why the authors didn't want to state this. They did not want to have the scientific conversation and dialogue, why they wanted to obfuscate and suppress the truth, or even have a debate about the origins of COVID-19. Was it for personal financial gain? Was it to hide U.S. financial interest into the Wuhan Institute of Virology indirectly? Was it to suppress the revelation that there was perhaps gain-of-function research that had been prohibited in the United States? Or were they concerned that a conspiracy would develop that it was bioterrorism? And I would state that their suppression and obfuscation has led to the exact mistrust and distrust and conspiracy theories that they may have tried to avoid. Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to have this hearing, and I think we will be able to get to the bottom of this, have an open dialogue. What they did is not science, and it will
Madam's
not
time has
prevent future
expired. I
funding.
now
Thank you.
recognize